lot of things that can affect the site costs in terms of the slope of the land, the type of soil, how big the house is, whether you're going to need to excavate very much, whether you're going to cut and fill. There's all sorts of issues that can affect the site costs. What we recommend is that people take a very measured approach through a pre-design and site assessment report, which will look at the soil test, a geotechnical report, and really examine it in quite deep detail. If you've bought a block that happens to have a P classification, that's a problem site, it's going to cost you a lot of money. If you have a site which is an A or an S, which is stable, then you're not going to have as much cost. So it's dependent on a lot of things, significantly the soil test and also the design of the home and exactly how far you're going to have to dig into the ground. So site costs can be significant. Water tables and trees and all those sorts of things can affect them greatly. The trick to all of these cost sort of issues is to actually work out a detailed budget before you start building. Now, this can be quite a challenge for people who are not in the industry, so you need to be able to plug into a professional who can actually assist you to do a proper cost plan of everything. That's every bit of labour and materials from start to finish. Now, some people might say, well, that's a bit complicated and maybe I don't want to know the answer. My answer to that is you do want to know the answer, because unfortunately there's too many stories of people launching into a project which sounded great, but unfortunately after they've spent all of their money and they can't borrow anymore, they're only 2/3 of the way through the project and they have a worthless house and they have not got any more ability to finance any more money into it, and it creates unending problems and it can disrupt families, everything. So I would recommend that rather than worry about what sort of finishes I can afford, let's put a cost plan together first through a quantity surveyor and other professionals that can help, and make sure that you know roughly what your costs are going to be, and then you can budget and plan properly, get proper quotes, fit your budget, and then you know where you're going. Very, very difficult. Very difficult indeed. Most of the trades will tend to treat owner-builders much differently. They understand that owner-builders don't know a lot about the industry, and they will tend to, shall I say, waste a lot of their time. Most trades understand that an owner-builder will treat every trade as their own building consultant, and they will ask the electrician plumbing questions and the plumber electrical questions, so they know that they spend a lot more time with owner-builders, hence they do load their prices quite a bit more. They also know that if an owner-builder doesn't really know what they're doing, they're likely to get you there as the plumber when it's not quite ready. Now that frustrates them no end, because they've put off 3 other jobs to come to your job and it's not ready to do. They can't just pack up tools and go to the other jobs because they're not prepared for them now. They've got other people in. So this becomes very, very frustrating for a lot of the trades, hence why they just bump up the price for owner-builders, because they generally from experience know that they get these sort of issues. Now, to buy at the builder rates, the only method that I know is one that we would employ, where we would on your behalf send out quote requests to all of the trades. So in a sense it's our letterhead that's going out and getting the quotes, and then the quotes come back to us. We authorise those quotes on a construction management type of contract. Now you can do that as an owner builder or as a non-owner builder, but that's about the only way that you're going to get those sort of rates. The fees that you would pay us, for example, would be, or for any other construction manager, would be just the costs to run the job, but there's no markup on all of those trades. We're being paid to manage them separately. So that's the only way you can actually get that trade rate, because the trades need to understand, and the suppliers need to understand, that they're not going to be wasting an inordinate amount of time looking after you. It can be very difficult. Most of the financial institutions will lend owner-builders up to 60% of valuation of land and home complete, and generally that's not enough. That's like going out to buy a new home on the open market and having to have 40% deposit saved. That would be beyond most people to be able to do that. It's the same with owner building. What we've found though is if you can present a detailed cost plan to your financial institution, plus have access to various professionals that have assisted in that cost plan so it's done properly, you'll find that they will likely be able to increase your finance to 80% of valuation. Now, there's various products around, some are better than others, but you really need to be very, very careful about what you choose to do. Again, it comes back to the budget question. If you've got a proper cost plan and it's well detailed, you'll find that the financial institutions will be looking much more favourably on you. The reason that banks particularly only lend up to 60% of valuation is because by experience they understand that many owner builders get themselves into trouble. So rather than the bank losing money, they will limit what you can borrow so that that forces you to have an enormous amount of security to back you up if you run out of money. Hence why a cost plan is something that banks love to see. A lot of people will buy a block of land because they love the block, and in their mind they have a picture of the dream home that's going to go on that block of land, and that's a valid dream to have. Unfortunately, with various planning schemes and regulatory controls, easements for example that might be on the block, you just might not be able to build the house that you want on that block of land. You might have height restrictions, there might be certain slopes, you might have overlooking, there might be heritage overlays. There's innumerable issues that could cause you a problem. So the only way to do it is before you buy the block of land you need to do some preliminary investigation. We recommend, in dealing with real estate agents, God bless them, that it's best to make your offer on the land conditional on getting a soil test, so that if that soil test comes back as a P or a H site or even an M if you want to be very technical, then you can renegotiate the price because it's going to cost you more money to build. So you can make your offer conditional on a good soil test, a good result coming back. If you're a good negotiator, you can force the vendor to provide that soil test. It depends how long it's been on the market, of course. So we would recommend that. We'd certainly recommend a preliminary look at the planning scheme, a preliminary look at what the building regulations are in that area, and a preliminary look at where the easements are and how big they are, because if they're large and you've got easements down two sides of the property, it can really restrict where your building footprint's going to have to lay. So again, these are things that professionals need to be able to help you with. There are ways to get that information, but you usually have to buy most of it, and it comes from various internet sites from all the relevant authorities. But a good investigation can save you a fortune, because people unfortunately do buy the wrong block of land for the wrong house, and many building surveyors have got quite a file of drawings of beautiful homes on magnificent blocks that will never ever get built because it was the wrong design on the wrong block. A straight soil test for a soil classification you should be able to get for $300 to $400 without much trouble in the suburban area. Even in the country areas it shouldn't be too much of a challenge. When you've got a challenging site, which may be on a very steep slope or might be on close to a cliff or something like that, your geotechnical or soil evaluation could be astronomical, and I've known them even around this area to be up around $10,000 on sites that are precariously located on a cliff where there's a potential for land slippage and this sort of thing. Now they're the sort of issues that come out of a pre-purchase report on a block of land, that you can identify some of these issues that are present, and it really is buyer beware. And if you've come across some of these things, then you can say, well, maybe that's not quite the block that I want. The research is really never ending, and it really starts on the land and exactly what the regulatory controls are on that land, and the planning controls and the relevant authorities such as the sewerage authority and the drainage and all that sort of thing. That's the initial research. The next research is on your basic concept idea, what you want in the home, how many bedrooms, how many kitchens, how many bathrooms, how many laundries, or whatever, if you want a granny flat, or what you want to do with the house, how many living areas there are, is there outdoor entertaining. You really need to research those things very carefully, what you actually want. That will then give you an idea of the size of the home. From the size of the home you can then put a ballpark figure on it within a particular range, but then you can start to say, well, I just cannot afford that, or I can afford this. So that research then leads you into areas such as what sort of finish do I want? Do I want brick veneer, or do I want weatherboards? Because at the end of the day, what will be the most crucial motivating decision will be the budget. Because if you can't afford to build the house, then don't start.